Hello and welcome to Crossing Borders with Nathan Lustig, where I have conversations with entrepreneurs doing business across borders and the people who support them, with a special focus on Latin America. My guest today is Pedro Neira, a Peruvian entrepreneur who started 4 businesses, including one that was acquired. Pedro's current business is called Mi Media Manzana, the largest dating app in Peru and the largest Latin American app built in LatAm. Pedro has an incredible story. After getting an MBA in Barcelona, he decided to work for a startup there, earning less than 1/3 of what his fellow graduates would earn. As the financial crisis hit, the printing business he was working for got hit hard, and he went back to Peru to start something new. After a failed startup, Pedro and his co-founders decided to start something new again, and ended up doing Adonde Vivir, which became Peru's largest real estate portal, which was later acquired by Tiger Global and Navint. We talk about his startup journey, what it's like building a business in Peru, advice for raising money in Latin America and the US, and his new startup, Mi Media Manzana. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Hello, Pedro. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Nathan. Thank you for inviting.
Yeah, I'm really happy we're able to get this going. So where are you in the world today?
Well, I'm currently the CEO and founder of Mi Media Manzana. Mi Media Manzana is the most downloaded dating app in Spanish-speaking Latin America. I've been working in this startup for the last 4 years.
And what city are you in today?
We're based in Lima, although we have one of our team members works from Arequipa, which is another city from Peru.
Awesome. And so tell me a little bit more about dating apps in Latin America. I think for people that maybe aren't from the region, they maybe only have heard of the Match.coms and the Tinders and the Bumbles of the world. So what's the landscape look like in Latin America?
The landscape is very green yet. It's still unexplored territory. I think there's a lot of opportunity. I started Mi Media Manzana 4 years ago when there was basically nothing going on in Latin America in the dating industry. Not even global players nor local players. So the only thing that existed was Match.com. And it had basically a desktop web page, and that was the only thing. But as a whole, the industry was very early stage. We had something going on a little bit in Chile and Argentina, but the rest of Latin America, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, there was basically nothing. That's basically the state of the industry in Latin America.
So tell me a little bit more about the product. How does it work? And are there any special things that you put into the product for Latin America?
Yeah, we have from the beginning, the dating industry, you can segment the dating industry through several different lenses. Our focus was always from the beginning focused on people who are looking for a long-term relationship. And that, in terms of age, is usually people over 35. From the beginning, we have iterated the product several times. We have changed a lot of the product. We went from web to mobile app. We made a lot of changes in the product, but we never changed our core segment, the people that we want to solve their need, which is people over 35 looking for a meaningful relationship, for a serious relationship. So we are now 90% of our traffic is mobile. We started as a desktop application, so we had to make this technological change a couple of years ago. But we decided to go all in with mobile because we knew that was the trend, and we were the first ones in Latin America to go full steam ahead with mobile. And 85% of our market in Latin America is Android, so we basically went for an Android application, and that's what we are right now. The current product has the idea is that you are going to meet other singles through your stories, kind of like the Instagram for dating. So you upload content constantly that shows who you are, what you like, your hobbies, what you're doing, and all those things are going to react to that, and you're going to meet other interesting people that are interested in the same things that you upload. And that's the way currently people meet other singles through Mi Media Manzana.
Interesting. That's an interesting take on the dating, the way to meet people. So, why did you choose that way? Do you think that was more interesting specifically for Latin America, or just a better way in general?
It goes back to let me tell you about some of the iterations that we did with our product. Because we started as we wanted to be the eHarmony of Latin America. So the eHarmony dating model is that you complete a very, very long questionnaire of over 200 questions, and then you have an algorithm that matches you with people that are compatible with your profile. That model has been hugely successful in the US and works very, very well for long-term relationships. So that made sense at the time to launch something similar localized to Latin America. And we started in 2014 with that. And it started going reasonably well. But once we decided that the web was completely dead and we had to go for mobile, then we were in a new territory, because that model just doesn't work on a mobile device. You are not going to complete 200 questions on a mobile phone. That's not happening, not in the US, anywhere. So once we were mobile, we ended up not having any model to kind of to follow, and we were forced to kind of develop our own way to match people for looking for serious relationships, and that's how we came up with the current one, meet other singles through their stories, which is a much more mobile kind of model. Works very well on mobile. That's more or less how we changed.
It's really interesting. So I'm going to dig more into your business in a bit later, but first I want to jump back to talk about your story. So you've been in the entrepreneurship ecosystem for a while now, in Peru and in Latin America. And so I'm curious, did you always know you were going to be an entrepreneur, or was it something that just sort of came up along the way?
I think I always were. When I look back, since when I was a child, I always had this, I don't know, the DNA, but I wasn't aware of that. I was aware that I'm an entrepreneur, like not too many years ago. I would say 5 or 6 years ago. I've been an entrepreneur for the last 12 years. I finished my MBA in Barcelona, and I launched my first startup in Barcelona, actually. The first 3 years, I did it in Barcelona. So, and then I came to Peru and launched Mi Media Manzana is my fourth startup. And then I came to Peru and I've already launched 3 startups from Peru.
What was your first business in Barcelona?
Actually, it was a very interesting business model. There was a guy who came to my MBA who wanted to apply the low-cost airline business model to the printing industry. So I said, "Wow, this is very interesting." So he had this thesis that you could reduce costs in printing jobs like 60 or 70% if you put together several jobs with the same characteristics in one same printing sheet in offset printing. So the guy said, "Okay, I've been working in the printing industry for the last 25 years. I know there's an opportunity here, but I'm not a manager and I know nothing about internet." So I said, "Okay, this sounds amazing. Let's do it." And that was my job after the MBA. It was a very strange job for an MBA from Barcelona, because 80% of my friends were going to finance and consulting, earning probably 3 times as I was earning. But I didn't care. I wanted to take a job that was interesting to me, and I knew I wanted to work in internet, something related to internet. So I took that job.
So you talked about your friends making a bunch more money after going through the MBA, and you've invested time and effort into it. What did your family and friends have to say when you decided to go onto a more risky path?
All my friends that were not from the MBA were okay with that because they knew me from before, and they knew I used to take these kind of odd decisions. But the people from the MBA didn't really understand. I mean, they said, why are you gonna take such a strange job if you can earn twice or thrice as much money doing this other stuff? The reason the reason behind that was that I started digging on what were these guys doing, especially the guys in finance. I had a couple of friends who work in Lehman Brothers, Barclays, and I said, okay, tell me what do you do in your day-to-day job? And when I found what they were doing, I said, you're not creating anything. You're not adding any value at all. And I said, I don't want to do this. I want to do something that creates value, creates something new, or at least try to do it. If I succeed or not, I don't really care that much, but I want to try to do it. And that's more or less how I got into this kind of strange decision.
And what took you back to Peru after being in Barcelona?
Well, first of all, it was in 2009, which is the crisis was Europe was going to hell, basically, Spain especially, and Peru was going through the best economic year of its history, literally. So if you compare the two scenarios, I mean, it was not that difficult to make that decision. And the startup, I had been working for 3 years, and it was based on printing advertising, and that was the first thing that went really bad when the crisis hit Europe and Spain. So it was not gonna take off. And comparing the two scenarios, I said, no, okay, it's a no-brainer. Let's go to Peru and do something there.
And did you have any culture shocks either going from Peru to Barcelona or back after you'd been working and living in Barcelona, going back to Peru?
Actually, I had a huge culture shock when I went to do the MBA in Barcelona, but not because of Barcelona, because I had been there before, but because of the people from other countries that I met during the MBA. I met, I don't know, Japanese people, Russians, French people, people from Brazil, from the US, Germans, and that was the best for me from the MBA. I really, really learned to empathize with people who think completely different from and came from completely different backgrounds than where I came from, and I think I grew a lot with that experience, and I still have close friends from that time. That was 12 years ago. So that was the most shocking and learning experience from that time.
So what was your business that you started when you went back to Peru?
Actually, we wanted to make, we had this crazy idea to make an Alibaba for Latin America. That was the idea. And it was completely crazy. We were actually, I think we were 6 guys, a guy with a Swedish guy with a lot of money, which funded the whole startup, the CTO and me. We were the founders, and we hired a group of very, very smart developers. And we said, okay, let's do it. And what happened is that the team was awesome. We started developing everything and working really well, very good chemistry. But after 6 or 7 months of developing, we were like, I don't know, 25% of getting the first version of anything on the market. And I began to realize that we were not going to make it. We didn't have the resources financially and the technical team to do it. And of course, the marketing dollars to put together supply and demand. And by then, I hadn't heard of the concept of fundraising. I didn't know that thing existed because it didn't exist in Peru. And I didn't know what a startup was. I was just doing what I was doing. But okay, so I came to the conclusion that this thing was not going to work. I turned to the main investor and said, okay, we have to close. Let's leave it here because if you continue, you're going to lose a lot more money. And we closed. And the day after we closed, we saw each other's faces and we said, okay, each of us, the founders, do we go to work on a bank or something, or we do something else? And we said, let's do something else together because the team really worked together. It was a good chemistry, and we started another thing. That was interesting because we started the team first, and the idea came second. So we didn't know exactly what we were going to do, but we knew who we were when we started, which is that doesn't happen very often, but it happened in our case.
Yeah, I think that maybe there's only one other person that I've interviewed on the podcast so far that had a similar story where they had the team and said, let's pick something, and then went out and did it. So how long did it take from saying we're going to start something together to coming up with the idea that you wanted to do? And what was that process like?
The thing is, we didn't pick one idea. What we did was let's scout can we do? What can this team do? And basically the process was let's see what works in developed countries and what could make sense that we do in Peru. So we started scouting a lot of things and we said, okay, one of the founders had the highest traffic horizontal portal, a directory by then called adonde.com. So we said, okay, for what can we use this traffic that we already have? And we said, let's build verticals. Let's build classifieds. Let's build, and we built a real estate portal, and we built a couple more, a car selling portal, and a couple of more verticals. We built that very fast. In a couple of months, we had 2 or 3 portals because the team was very good. And then what happened is that one of them started to take off like really separate from the rest, which was the real estate portal. It became, we were very good at SEO by then. So we became like in 6 months, the leading real estate portal in Peru. We had huge traffic, and we had the highest listings in the country and the highest traffic, and we started growing from there. But we were losing money. We were not profitable. We were not even close to be profitable, and we only had one funder that put the money. Every month had to put some money. So what happened was this guy comes to me and one day, like after 12 months, and says, listen, Pedro, we have to close the company because I don't have any more money. And I said, okay, let me calculate how much would it cost you to close the company. And we ended up with I said, okay, to close the company, you're going to have to invest $100,000, something like that. And I said, let's do something. If I came up with a figure, if I can raise 250,000 in the next 3 months, I think I can save the company because the traffic is going good. And I said to this guy, can I buy you 3 months? If I don't raise $250,000 in the next 3 months, we close the company. And the guy said, yes, let's do it. And then a random series of events and a lot of luck led us to Tiger Global Management in that time frame. And we ended up raising a lot of money from those guys. And we didn't close the company.
So raising money in Latin America is really, really tough. There's, especially in 2009, 10, 11, even still today, it's hard. So how did you do it? And Tiger Global is a huge fund, and you must have been one of the first tech companies to get money from them in LatAm. Where did you raise, and how did you do it?
It's hard and it's not hard at the same time. I would say some things in some ways is much easier to raise money in Latin America than to raise in the US. In other ways, it's much more difficult. But let's go back to 2009, 2010. We were the leading real estate portal, and we had, as I mentioned, it's a series of random lucky events. In the same building, the leading job portal was operating, the same building that we were operating. So I met the manager, and this manager, this company is called Boomerang, which is the leading job portal in Latin America, and they were mainly funded by Tiger Global. Tiger Global was a main shareholder of Boomerang by then. Now Boomerang has many other shareholders, and they were looking to expand to the real estate area, and they didn't have any technology, and they were looking to buy. So I think it was luck that we were at this right time with the right metrics. And then came up a very, very asymmetric negotiation because it was my first time fundraising, and the guy on the other side probably invested in 3 companies a week. But we were negotiating for like 6 months until we closed the deal. And yes, we were one of the first companies in Latin America that they invested. For sure, we were the first one in Peru. But we were one of the first probably outside Argentina, I would say, because they had invested in Argentina before.
And what did you learn from that negotiation, and what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs that are maybe going through their first negotiation for venture capital?
I learned something interesting, which is you have to know who's in charge in the negotiation. I knew we were running out of money, but they didn't know that. And I knew they wanted to buy a portal, and I knew we were the only portal in Peru, so they had no alternative. So what happened is that I started in the negotiation itself. I committed a ton of mistakes. The guy ate me up like 10 times with rational arguments. But what happened at the end was that I said, you're completely right. But if we don't reach that valuation, the valuation we wanted, we're not going to make a deal. And that's just to, I mean, if it shows the asymmetry in information that you can use into your advantage when you are racing. You shouldn't always think that the other guy is making you a favor by putting money in your company. Sometimes it's completely the other way around. And if you are aware of that, or at any point in negotiation, you should use that into your advantage.
How much money did you end up raising, and then what did you do once you raised that money?
We can't disclose the amount of money, but we used the money to grow the team, grow the sales team, and we grew the company in headcount. We were like 10 people. In 18 months we were like 30. More importantly, we grew sales like 10 times in 2 years. So it was pretty crazy growth in sales, and we reached break even. The company is extremely profitable today. After they invested in the company, my 2 co-founders left the company. I stayed with the company, and I was lucky enough to live the hockey stick part of the growth, and I experienced myself that part of the growth, and it was amazing. It was great.
what were some of the things that you remember when you were going through that hockey stick part of the growth, either just in your day to day or lessons that you learned that you can share?
The lessons, well, obviously we had much more money for anything than we didn't have before, from the funding that we got, and also from the money we were generating ourselves. So that was a huge change. But the other thing, which was not that good, is that I started to realize, I was not aware at the beginning, but I started to realize that I was not in control anymore, that I was becoming an employee, not an entrepreneur. And that started to kind of demotivate me slowly. We were making more money each month, but I was making less decisions and I was building incremental stuff every month. So that started to demotivate me a lot. I ended up being very unhappy, so unhappy that I resigned from my own company once it was extremely profitable. I left the company. And it was a very, very sad moment. I still remember when I wrote a 3-letter page and I read it in front of the whole company, and everybody was crying, and half of the people didn't understand why I was leaving, because they said, but the company is doing amazing. Why are you leaving? Are you crazy? But that was my experience. I mean, doesn't have to be. That's when I learned that I'm an entrepreneur, that I need to start stuff, that I need to create something new. Once it's created, I lose interest. That's not what I want to do.
So it's funny, you had to have an acquisition to know that you were an entrepreneur. That's backwards for most people, I would say.
Yeah, that's what happened. As I mentioned, in my first 2 startups, I didn't know I was starting anything. For me, it was just my job. I didn't see any differently from someone working on a bank. Now I see the difference, but by then, it's just what I did. I wasn't aware of that. But yes, it took me an acquisition to realize that's true. Yeah.
So what did you do after leaving the company? Did you start Mi Media Manzana right away, or did you take some time to figure out what you wanted to do next?
I figured what I wanted to do next while I was resigning. So I had a lot of time to plan for Mi Media Manzana while I was leaving the other job, because I told the guys from now, okay, guys, I'm going to leave. I'm resigning. And but I didn't quit from one day to the next. They said, okay, let us find someone to be in charge. And I stayed for a few more months. And in those months, I started planning the launch of Media Manzana. I left the company on a Friday, and on the next Monday, I opened the Media Manzana office with my co-founders. So I didn't have a single day off between one startup and the next one. I was so eager to start Mi Media Manzana that I didn't want to take a week off. I was looking forward to start it.
That's even more quick than when I had my first company, and into the second, I think I only took 6 weeks off.
I didn't take a day.
Yeah, you
Not a
didn't
single
take a
day.
day. That is impressive. So, how did you choose this business instead of a different kind? In the last one, you had the team, and then you tried a bunch of different things and found the one that worked. How did you go about it this time?
Yeah, this one was completely different. That's interesting, because the process was completely different. Now I was aware that I'm an entrepreneur. I knew how, more or less, how the process works. I knew that I needed co-founders, and I knew I needed the skills I needed to acquire. I knew the funding that I knew I had to fundraise, which is something I didn't know before. And with all this knowledge, I said, okay, what is working in other countries that I think, together with my co-founders, we have the skill set necessary to make it happen. This case, not in Peru, but in Latin America, because we wanted to solve something for a bigger market. And that was a process. That's how I got into dating. I concluded that dating is It's almost a mature industry in the US, but hasn't even started in Latin America. And it's going to happen sooner or later. And we said, we have the skills to make it happen, so let's do it. And that's how we ended up. It was much more conscious and aware of the process than the other times.
And you talked about fundraising for this company. Did you raise money locally, abroad, and when? How did you do it?
Yeah, Mi Media Manzana, I've raised 4 rounds. I've raised money from South Korea, from New York, from Palo Alto, and a lot from Lima. And I started racing in Lima. I had the advantage that I had the previous success of Adonde Vivir, and I could raise some money. I raised, I don't know, like $500,000, basically with a PowerPoint, because we had no MVP. Something that gave me a lot of credibility is that me and the other co-founders, we invested a significant amount of our money. So when I went to a local business angel, I said, okay, I'm putting $100,000 from my pocket. So if this fails, I'm going to lose $100,000. And I think that gave us a lot of credibility to raise locally from people that had no experience ever investing in startups. And one thing led to another, and I raised from I raised from a couple of seed funds from abroad. The process was completely different. Raising locally is absolutely different, maybe opposite from raising in the US. And I had to learn to raise in both places at the same time. And that has been interesting. Yeah.
So let's dig into the differences more. Can you describe what it's like raising money in Lima versus raising money in New York or Silicon Valley?
Yeah, it's almost like a cartoon. I mean, in Lima, people are going to ask you for a ton of Excel spreadsheets. They're going to want a 1 hour presentation. They want to be sure that they invest and they will not lose money. They want to invest in a safe bet. They want to hear that. In the US, I've literally raised from the 2 funds from the US. They didn't ask me for a single figure, a single thing. They said, "Who are you? What's your team? Why do you think you can make it? And then, what are you up for? I mean, what's your goal, your target? Is your market big enough? And if they buy those 2 things, they invest in you, because it's not huge amounts of money. It's 200,000, 300,000. So it's not like a Series A. Those small tickets, they invest only with validating the market and the team. Later rounds are different, but at the beginning, that's the experience.
What advice would you give to Latin American entrepreneurs about raising money? Should they look at home first or look in the US or try to do both like you did?
I think they should try to do both. I think it's a good idea, but they have to be aware that the way to raise is completely different. They should raise locally because that helps to raise abroad. But I would say people that think that other funds from the US or other countries will not fund a company in Colombia or Ecuador are completely wrong. They do fund. They just need good projects. They need good teams. And if they find them, they're going to invest. Not every fund, but there are enough funds that will do it. You just need to network a lot. That's another advice I would give to them. You need to work on your networking way before you are racing around, because once you need it, it's already too late. To get to the right people at the right time. And for that, you have to, go to events, help a lot of other entrepreneurs because they give you great introductions. Go to, accelerators, anything that in the ecosystem that helps you grow your network will eventually help you.
And what about the US investors that aren't looking at Latin America so far? There seems to be a small subset that are willing to look so far. What advice would you give to them about why they should be looking at Latin America?
I think Latin America is the next, geographically, is naturally the next part of the world that is going to grow like hell. I mean, it happened first in the US, then Asia grew for several years, and now it's the turn of Latin America. Everybody in Latin America has a mobile device. We will be able to pay with that mobile device in the next years. And those metrics are already plateauing in the US and Europe. So this is the area of the world with the highest population that is gonna be the most interesting market in the next 5-10 years. I think the highest growth market.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's spot on. It's right with our investment thesis. So glad to hear it from you as well. So one thing you mentioned was networking and programs that can help you, whether it's accelerators or just other entities in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
What ones have you worked with, and what advice would you give to people about trying to work with either accelerators or other types of people that help in the industry?
Yeah, I've worked with two amazing programs that have helped me a lot during these I would say, last 3 years, especially in Mi Media Manzana. One is Black Box Connect, which is an accelerator in Palo Alto in Silicon Valley, and the other one is an organization which is present in like 25 countries, which is called Endeavor, which helps entrepreneurs, high impact entrepreneurs in emerging countries. But the first advice that I would give is try to go to an accelerator in the US. The difference in what you are going to learn from an accelerator, any accelerator, I mean, Techstars or Y Combinator, Black Box or whatever, is going to be completely different than what you are going to learn in any accelerator in your home country. So, and the experience is going to be very different. So try to do it. Invest time and invest money if necessary in that experience, because it's going to change your life and change probably the life of your business. That was the case for us in Mi Media Manzana. After our experience in Black Box, things changed. Especially, we shifted our mindset. We were like very much more ambitious after going to the US and through that program than before. Our path to growth accelerated much more after that experience. So I recommend that very highly to any Latin American entrepreneur. And the experience with Endeavor has been amazing, mostly in the mentorship level. Endeavor has, I think, by far the best network of mentors in Latin America. And whenever I needed a mentor in a specific area, they've helped me a lot. So those are the two organizations that work and still work to date and have helped me a lot in this ride.
So one of the things that we see with a lot of entrepreneurs in Latin America is that they do want to go do an accelerator in the US. And from what I've seen, there seems to be, there's the Y Combinators, the Techstars, 500 startups, and then depending on your niche, there's some other top tier ones.
Yeah.
But then there seems to be a pretty big drop off, and we see some entrepreneurs in LatAm end up with not so great entrepreneur friendly deals from mid to lower tier accelerators, maybe not even in Silicon Valley, in random places around the US. How did you go about picking your accelerator, and what advice would you give to people on really understanding the deal that you get out of it and make sure that you're getting everything you can out of your accelerator?
Yeah, one very, clear advice is just go to Silicon Valley. I don't know. I wouldn't go to any accelerator outside Silicon Valley. That's a very simple advice. But what happens there, it's just not happening anywhere in any other city in the world. And I think for an entrepreneur, it's an amazing learning experience. of course, probably not all the accelerators in Silicon Valley are good. I don't know which ones are good and which ones are not. I I was lucky enough to hear a talk by the guy that runs Blackbox. So I knew what Blackbox was about before going there. But you just have to do your research. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's that difficult. You can try to talk to alumni from that accelerator. That shouldn't be hard. Of course, look at the press, look at reviews, and if you do a little research, you can have a pretty good idea if the accelerator is at least good enough or worth your time. But I would also try to apply to the big ones. I mean, I got into Blackbox, which is obviously not one of the big ones, but it's a very nice one. At the third time, I was rejected the first two times I tried, and I kept trying. And I think that's one of the things we entrepreneurs do. We keep trying. We keep trying until we get it done. So I don't know. I think that would be my advice to entrepreneurs looking for accelerators in abroad.
So after raising some money and going through the accelerator, what was your inflection point for your business to be able to grow it quickly like it has been over the last, say, 6 to 12 months?
I think after we went through Endeavor selection panel, which was coincidentally in San Francisco, which was another excuse for me to go to Palo Alto and visit Silicon Valley again. And the feedback from those guys was absolutely clear. They said, "What I mean, and it doesn't matter what you do on dating, you have to do it on mobile." And we were building a web platform. So when I came back from San Francisco from that selection panel from Endeavor, which we got accepted then that was 2015, we changed the whole company to mobile. We changed people. We started training people on mobile. We had to do everything again from scratch, basically, to be mobile first and mobile only now, probably. And that took us a lot of time and consumed a lot of resources, a lot of the funding that we had raised. So because we had to come up, monetizing was not the same. We had to learn to monetize again, and in that process, we ran out of money, and we hadn't reached our metrics. So it was a rough period. It was a very very difficult period last year. We finally ended up raising another round, and I think we are on the right track now, product wise, which is the most important thing we're focusing right now. Then we're gonna focus on monetizing, but our product is hitting the right metrics in the right way finally after a lot of time.
And what's next for you in the business going forward? What are the next few goals that you want to hit?
Okay, so then our next goal, short-term goal, is to reach a retention rate good enough so we can start with our next milestone, which is monetizing. We need to reach a ratio of customer lifetime value to customer acquisition cost. That's going to happen probably in the next 3-4 months. And once we reach that milestone, we're going to expand to 20, 25 cities in Latin America. And then that's when the big growth is gonna come geographically. With that expansion geographically, we're gonna end up with a platform which would have between 500,000 and 1 million monthly active users, which is gonna be attractive enough for any big player to start looking at us. And we're already market leaders but with a much lower amount of monthly active users. We need to be much bigger in that metric in order to be attractive for the big players to look at us. That's more or less the plan.
No, it's interesting. And one thing you mentioned was geography, which reminded me that we need to talk about Peru, since you're the first Peruvian entrepreneur that's been on the podcast. We had one investor who's based in Lima, but I wanted to dig into the ecosystem in Peru a little bit. What's it like living in Lima, and what's the entrepreneurial ecosystem look like today?
Well, the entrepreneurial ecosystem has grown amazingly in the last years. I've lived it from since it was non-existent. Literally, there was no ecosystem 5 years ago. No, not five. Maybe when I started at Donde Vivir, maybe it was like 8 years ago. There was no ecosystem at all. Then I think the first important milestone, was that when Huayra came to Peru, that marked like a big step for us, because a lot of people started applying to Huayra, and a lot of people, especially young people, started to know what a startup was. And we had like a first run of entrepreneurs. Some of them were good, some of them were not that good, but we had a lot of people interested in it. Then Startup Peru, the state, came along and started doing some interesting things. Of course, they committed mistakes, but then they corrected them, and now the Peruvian state is helping entrepreneurs a lot. Every year they're doing better, so that's very good. And along the way, in all this process, we had a lot of investors coming along. So at the beginning, I was by myself trying to convince people to invest in a very strange thing, which is a startup. And now you have maybe 50, 100 angel investors that have invested in one or two startups in the last years, and probably will keep investing. Some of them will keep investing in startups. So we now have a healthy, small but healthy ecosystem. And the next is we need our first local fund. It's true you can raise from abroad, but of course we need a local fund, a venture fund, to start in Peru, so we get access to Series A rounds, at least for our companies, from a fund from Peru. That's the thing that should happen next to grow the ecosystem.
So beyond having another fund, what are some of the other things that you think need to happen for the ecosystem to really take that next step?
We need more success stories. Basically, we have probably one, which is Cine Papaya exit. But we need more. Once we have 5, 6, 10, that's when the thing is gonna ignite, because a lot of investors are gonna want to invest again. That's gonna attract a lot of entrepreneurs. You're gonna have serial entrepreneurs, more experienced entrepreneurs, and that's when the thing is gonna take off to another level. But that's the next thing that needs to happen here.
So you've seen a lot of change in the ecosystem since you started your first business and up until today. If you could go back to when you were starting your first business in Peru, after you get back from Barcelona, knowing what you know today, what advice would you give yourself?
I think it would be very simple. Just read a book, read Lean Startup from Eric Rice. That simple book would have probably prevented me to make a ton of mistakes, and mostly prevented me from trying to apply everything that I had learned in my MBA to a startup, which is completely nonsense. So that's probably the advice I would give to myself if I would go back in time.
That's really interesting about the MBA, because a lot of entrepreneurs in Latin America end up getting an MBA and then trying to start something. So what were some of the things that you had to unlearn to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I had an MBA, and I have been reading books about startups for the last 10 years, every single day of my life. So I have a bit of the two worlds. Basically, everything you learn in an MBA is based on the premise that you know what your market is and you know what product you're selling. So everything that you learn on the MBA has these two premises. You're building a car, so that you know what product you're building, and you know your market. It's people, I don't know, from 30 with such income and blah, blah, blah. But all those theories don't work at all when you don't know what product you're building and when you don't know who your market is. So for that scenario, where you don't know your market and you don't know what product you're going to end up with, you need another set of tools. And that set of tools is being developed in the last 10 years, 15 years. It's very, very, very new, the set of knowledge that you need to operate in that scenario where you don't know basically nothing. So that's where the tools from Lean Startup and Eric Rice and Steve Blank and all these people are very, very useful. That's more or less my take on that.
So beyond the Lean Startup and Steve Blank's books, what other books would you recommend, or podcasts, blogs, documentaries, to other entrepreneurs or just people in general that you like to recommend?
I love the podcast Masters of Scale. It's a great podcast from Reid Hoffman. I learned a lot from that one. And yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, that's a great one. I was listening to the Katerina Fake episode this morning about Flickr and growing the business. Really interesting.
Yeah.
Really well done. So what other pieces of advice would you give to entrepreneurs from the region when they're just picking their idea? Because you did both. You did the let's get a great team and think it through, and then also looked abroad and brought something back that you thought you could execute on. Which one do you think is right? And what would you suggest other people do?
There's no right one at all. I mean, it depends on the situation. Some people do great in one way, and some people do great in another one. And in my case, I did well in once, but that doesn't mean I have to repeat that every single time. So I think it depends. There's no formula. It's not a recipe. But if I had to, I mean, in Latin America, people don't still see the startup world as a real job. Not everybody does that. So I've seen that in Peru a lot, where people do that as a side thing. Maybe they keep working on their day job and they kind of explore if they would launch a startup or not. And I think that's not serious. That won't get you anywhere. So if you want to do something, just quit your job and go all in. That's the way. I mean, that's the way I advise. Doesn't mean it worked for everybody, but that would be my advice.
Well, I'm definitely excited to see you guys keep growing and more startups, more entrepreneurs start to do startups across the region, and really enjoyed your story. And thanks again for being willing to tell it.
Well, thank you very much, Nathan.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of Crossing Borders. I really enjoyed this conversation with one of the most experienced entrepreneurs in the region. I'm interested to see how Peru's ecosystem grows, and would love to do our first investment to support a Peruvian entrepreneur sometime this year. Thanks to Cristobal from Jaguar Ventures for introducing me to Pedro, and to Angel and Sofia for helping produce this podcast. As always, please share with your friends and let Pedro and me know if you have any questions or if you actually enjoyed it. Hope you did, and have a great rest of your day.